He delivered mail to the same neighborhood for 12 years, walking the same route every morning with a friendly wave and a quiet smile. The residents knew him as Frank, the reliable mailman who never missed a day. But when 8-year-old Emma disappeared from her front yard and the police had no leads, Frank did something that revealed he wasn't just any postal worker. He was a former Delta Force operator. Welcome to the Untold Stories, where ordinary people reveal extraordinary pasts when it matters most. Before we dive into this incredible story of hidden heroism, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss stories like this. Also, smash that like button if you believe our veterans deserve recognition for their continued service. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today, because these stories connect us all. Now, let's dive into the remarkable tale of Frank Martinez, a man whose past would save a child's life and remind an entire community what real heroism looks like. This is a story you'll never forget, so make sure you're subscribed because we publish incredible content like this every single week. Maple Street was the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business. White picket fences, manicured lawns, and the sound of children playing in driveways created the perfect suburban paradise. For 12 years, Frank Martinez had walked these same sidewalks, carrying letters and packages to familiar faces who had grown to trust him as part of their daily routine. At 47 years old, Frank was exactly what you'd expect from a postal worker. Medium height, slightly graying hair, and a gentle demeanor that made elderly residents feel safe when he delivered their Social Security checks. He wore his blue uniform with quiet pride, kept his truck organized, and always had a smile for the kids who ran to greet him after school. What the neighbors didn't know was that Frank's gentle smile had once been a weapon. His soft-spoken manner had been perfected during 8 years in Delta Force, where blending into civilian populations was a matter of life and death. His ability to remember every face, every routine, every detail of the neighborhood wasn't just good customer service. It was tactical awareness. Frank had joined the Army at 18, driven by a desire to serve his country and test himself against the most challenging military training available. After completing basic training and airborne school, he had volunteered for Special Forces selection. Only the top 10% of candidates made it through the grueling process, and Frank was among the elite who earned the coveted Green Beret. But even among Special Forces, Frank stood out. His natural ability to read people, combined with his fluency in Spanish and Arabic, made him a perfect candidate for Delta Force recruitment. For 8 years, he had operated in some of the world's most dangerous places, tracking high-value targets and gathering intelligence that saved countless American lives. His service record was classified, but the medals hidden in his bedroom drawer told the story of a warrior who had never failed a mission. Bronze Star, Silver Star, Purple Heart, decorations earned in firefights and rescue operations that would never be discussed publicly. Frank had carried wounded comrades to safety and eliminated threats that most people would never even know existed. The transition to civilian life had been difficult. After years of high-stakes operations, where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death, suburban postal delivery seemed almost trivial. But Frank had found purpose in serving his community, protecting the people of Maple Street in a different way by ensuring their mail arrived safely every day. Frank's daily routine was methodical and precise. He arrived at the postal facility at 6:30 a.m., sorted mail with military efficiency, and began his route at exactly 7 a.m. Every house on Maple Street was logged in his memory. Who lived there, their schedules, their habits. It wasn't nosiness. It was the same situational awareness that had kept him alive in combat zones. The residents saw a friendly mailman who remembered their names and asked about their families. What they didn't see was a trained operator who noticed every new car on the street, every stranger walking through the neighborhood, every deviation from normal patterns. Frank's postal route had become his area of operations, and he protected it with the same vigilance he'd once shown overseas. Tuesday morning started like any other. Frank loaded his truck at the postal facility, sorted the mail by address, and began his route at exactly 7 a.m. His first stop was always the Johnson house, where 8-year-old Emma waited by the mailbox to pet his truck and ask about the letters he carried. She was a bright child with curious brown eyes and an infectious smile. Emma had been part of Frank's routine for 3 years, ever since her family moved to Maple Street. She would run out when she heard his truck, always with the same excited questions about where the mail came from and whether he had any letters from faraway places. Frank enjoyed these moments, seeing in Emma the innocence he had fought to protect during his military service. But Emma wasn't at the mailbox that morning. Frank noticed immediately. His training had taught him to recognize when normal patterns were disrupted. The Johnson house felt different, somehow wrong. There was tension in the air, the kind of atmospheric shift that had warned him of danger in Afghanistan. Something was very wrong on Maple Street. Frank knocked on the door, and Sarah Johnson answered with red-rimmed eyes and a trembling voice. "Emma's missing," she said, barely able to speak. "She was playing in the front yard, and then ... she was just gone." Frank's military training kicked in automatically, his mind shifting from postal worker to tactical operator in an instant. The police had been called 3 hours earlier. Detective Mike Reynolds was interviewing neighbors, trying to piece together a timeline of Emma's disappearance. There were no witnesses, no signs of struggle, no screams, just an empty yard where a little girl had been playing moments before. The detective's frustrated expression told Frank everything he needed to know. Frank listened to the detective's questions with growing concern. The investigation was following standard procedures, but those procedures were designed for ordinary criminals, not the kind of predators who could make a child vanish without a trace. Frank's Delta Force training had taught him to think like the enemy, to anticipate their moves and find their weaknesses. While the police searched the immediate area, Frank began his own assessment. He walked the perimeter of the Johnson property, not looking for obvious clues, but for subtle signs that trained eyes might miss. Tire tracks in the soft earth, disturbed vegetation, the direction of bent grass, details that could tell a story if you knew how to read them. Frank's mind automatically shifted into mission mode. He cataloged every vehicle he'd seen on his route over the past week, every stranger who had seemed out of place, every deviation from normal neighborhood patterns. His postal truck had given him access to observe without being observed, to gather intelligence while appearing to do nothing more than deliver mail. 2 blocks away, Frank noticed something that made his blood run cold. Fresh tire tracks in the alley behind Morrison Street, where a van had parked for exactly 7 minutes, long enough to grab a child, but not long enough to attract attention. The tracks showed the distinctive wear pattern of commercial tires, and there were scuff marks where someone had opened a sliding door. Frank examined the tire tracks with the precision of a crime scene investigator. The depth and width told him the vehicle's approximate weight and size. The turning radius indicated a full-size van, probably a rental. The driver had backed in, facing the exit, a professional approach. That suggested this wasn't a crime of opportunity, but a carefully planned operation. Frank pulled out his phone and called Detective Reynolds. "I need to speak with you privately," he said, his voice carrying an authority that made the detective listen. When they met at the edge of the search area, Frank's entire demeanor had changed. Gone was the friendly mailman, replaced by a professional whose presence commanded immediate respect. "I found where they took her," Frank said quietly. "Van tracks in the alley behind Morrison Street. Commercial tires, probably a rental. Driver parked facing east for a quick escape route to the highway." Detective Reynolds stared at him in surprise. "How do you know all this?" Frank's answer was simple. "I used to hunt people for a living." Frank explained his background quickly and efficiently. 8 years Delta Force, specialized in human intelligence and target acquisition. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq, multiple classified operations he couldn't discuss. After his discharge, he'd wanted a quiet life, but his training never left him. He'd been watching the neighborhood for 12 years. Detective Reynolds made the smart decision to listen. Frank's analysis was thorough and professional. The abduction had been planned, not random. Someone had been watching Emma's routine, timing her outdoor play sessions, waiting for the perfect moment when her parents were distracted. The van had been positioned for a quick grab-and-go operation. Using his mental map of the neighborhood, Frank identified 3 possible escape routes. The highway on-ramp was the most likely, but a professional would avoid main roads immediately after an abduction. Frank suggested checking the industrial area near the old railroad tracks, where abandoned warehouses provided perfect hiding places for someone who needed time to plan. Frank's theory proved correct. Police found the rental van abandoned in the industrial district, but Emma was nowhere to be found. The vehicle had been wiped clean. No fingerprints or DNA evidence left behind. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a carefully planned operation by someone who knew how to avoid detection and stay 1 step ahead of law enforcement. While the police processed the van, Frank was already thinking 3 steps ahead. The abductor had switched vehicles, but they needed a secure location to hold Emma while they planned their next move. Frank's military experience had taught him to think like his enemy, to anticipate their needs and limitations in a way that traditional police training couldn't match. Frank studied the area with tactical precision. The abandoned warehouses were too obvious, too easily searched. A professional would want something more secure, more private. His eyes settled on the old Riverside Motel, a run-down establishment that had been barely operating for years. Cash transactions, no questions asked, perfect for someone who needed to disappear. Detective Reynolds was skeptical. "That's a pretty big leap," he said, but Frank's confidence was unshakable. "Room 237, he said with absolute certainty. "Corner room, back exit, view of the parking lot. That's where I'd take her if I wanted to stay hidden while planning the next phase." His certainty came from years of experience in environments where wrong guesses meant death. Frank explained his reasoning. The room number had been advertised on a faded billboard, visible from the industrial area. The corner location provided multiple escape routes. The back exit allowed movement without being seen from the main road. It was exactly the kind of tactical position Frank would have chosen for a temporary holding operation in hostile territory. The SWAT team surrounded the Riverside Motel while Frank watched from the command vehicle. He'd insisted on being present, his expertise too valuable to waste. When they breached room 237, they found Emma tied to a chair, frightened but unharmed. The abductor had fled through the back exit moments before their arrival, but Emma was safe, and that was all that mattered. Emma ran to her parents with tears streaming down her face, and Frank watched the reunion from the background with quiet satisfaction. This was why he'd served his country, why he'd endured years of dangerous missions, to protect innocent people like Emma and her family. His service hadn't ended when he left the military. It had just taken a different form. Detective Reynolds approached Frank with new respect. "How did you know exactly where to find her?" he asked. Frank's answer was simple. "I've been hunting predators for 20 years. They're predictable once you understand their psychology." He'd used the same analytical skills that had made him successful in Delta Force to save a child's life. The story made national news within hours. Mailman uses Delta Force training to save kidnapped child. Read the headlines across every major network. Frank was uncomfortable with the attention, but he understood its importance. The story inspired other veterans to use their skills in civilian service, showing that military training could be applied to protect communities. Frank returned to his mail route the next day, but everything was different. The neighbors looked at him with new eyes, understanding that the quiet mailman had been protecting them all along. Children still ran to greet him, but now their parents watched with grateful smiles, knowing their community was guarded by someone truly special. The Postal Service offered Frank a promotion to supervisor, but he declined. His mission was on Maple Street, walking the same route every day, watching for threats that others might miss. He'd found his purpose in this quiet neighborhood, serving his community with the same dedication he'd once shown his country in the world's most dangerous places. Emma's rescue had reminded Frank why he'd chosen this life. Every letter delivered, every package signed for, every friendly wave to a neighbor was part of a larger mission. He was still a guardian, still a protector, just wearing a different uniform. The skills that had made him an elite soldier now made him an exceptional postal worker and community guardian. Word of Frank's heroic actions spread throughout the veteran community, inspiring others to find ways to serve their communities. Frank had shown that the transition from military to civilian life didn't mean abandoning the warrior mindset. It meant applying those skills to protect the innocent in different ways, continuing the mission on the home front. Local law enforcement began consulting with Frank on missing person cases, recognizing that his unique skill set could help solve cases that stumped traditional investigators. Frank's ability to think like both predator and protector made him invaluable in understanding how criminals operated and where they might hide their victims. Years later, Frank still walks the same route on Maple Street. He still delivers mail with a friendly smile and a quiet demeanor. But now everyone knows that beneath the blue uniform beats the heart of a warrior who chose to serve his community with the same courage he once showed his country, proving that heroes come in all forms. Frank Martinez proved that military service doesn't end when soldiers come home. It transforms into new missions of protection and service. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not in foreign countries, but in suburban neighborhoods where families trust their safety to heroes who wear postal uniforms instead of combat gear. His story reminds us that veterans continue serving long after they take off their military uniforms. They become teachers, police officers, firefighters, and yes, postal workers who bring their training and dedication to protect civilian communities. Frank's quiet heroism shows us that the most important missions are often the ones that never make headlines. If this story of Frank Martinez moved you, please hit that like button right now and subscribe to the Untold Stories. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about real heroism. Comment below with your thoughts and tell us about veterans in your community who continue serving. These stories matter, and your support helps us tell them. Thank you for watching.